All right. Well, you want to lead off this one, or do you want me to lead it off?
I didn't put any notes together,
I
so
didn't either.
I
So
mean, for the intro, I
you
mean,
can
I
just
just
wing it.
yeah. I don't know. You start, and I'll just interrupt whenever I want to.
Okay.
Welcome to the Greatest Lists podcast, a show about music and lists. This season, your hosts Jason and Eric are counting down the top 25 guitar solos of the 80s and the top 25 guitar solos of the 90s. Think your favorite made the list? Tune in and find out. Take it away, boys.
Welcome to a special bonus episode of Greatest Lists. It's Jason here, of course. And, of course, it's Eric.
Of course, it's me. Who else would it be?
A horse. A horse.
Horse.
Is a horse. Of course,
Wait,
of
what'd
course.
you call me?
Hey, we are here. This was kind of Eric's idea. And, you know, when we released the bonus show for Huey Lewis and the News, their sports album, their 40th anniversary. Wow. 1983 is chock full of just influential albums, I would say, not just of the 80s, but of all time. And we were going down through the list, and or maybe Eric was first. I can't remember how it all went, but he was like, let's get on here and talk about all the other albums in 1983.
Yeah. I mean, well, I already think 83 is the beginning of the quote unquote 80s sound. You know, 81, 80, 81, 82, you still got some disco mixed in there. You still got some country crossover and some, you know, easy listening stuff. But 83 is when 80s music really took off. I think you probably remember a couple of years ago, I walked through all of the top 40 countdown lists of the 80s all year long. And so, you know, 83 is just a pivotal year for me as far as 80s music. So, yeah, there's a ton of albums. I don't think people really realize what all came out in 83.
Yeah, and we're gonna give it to them definitely in this episode. You know, we usually go track by track. We'll feature one album, but this being, you know, towards the end of 83, we really haven't or don't have the time to do a real track by track a review of several of these, which deserve a track by track review. So what we're gonna do is basically just run down. I pulled together a list of some of the ones that were influential to me, and you might have some more to add to this list, Eric. And then what we're going to do is count down our top 5 list of albums that came out in 83. We'll go from 5 to 1, give you a little build up if you didn't look at the show notes. And we'll, if you're listening to us on Spotify, we'll play one song from the album. We're going to pick a song.
We'll play each album in its entirety.
Yeah.
10 albums coming at you right now.
8 hours later, people are like, get this episode over with. No. So that's kind of the setup for this episode.
Yeah.
We'll just go through and first of all here, just list off some of these albums and trying not to get into our picks here. But here's, I'm just going to throw out the first 5 here. So we got Def Leppard's Pyromania, Journey's Frontiers, Bryan Adams' Cuts Like a Knife, U2 War, and Tears for Fears' The Hurting.
Yeah. And there's,
I mean that's a killer list right there.
Right there is a set of albums right there. Then you've got Mental Health from Quiet Riot. You've got David Bowie's Let's Dance, Cargo from Men at Work, Texas Flood, Stevie Ray Vaughan. And then a little known band that at the time I don't think anybody really gave any attention to, but Kill 'Em All from Metallica came out in 83.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, was that their first? Their debut?
That was their very first one.
That's awesome. Another debut in 83 was Weird Al.
Yeah.
His self-titled album came out.
Pivotal.
Pivotal, of course. I mean, gosh, his career has just been incredible. I found that album and the Dare to Be Stupid album on vinyl for $1 a piece.
Man,
at a
I don't care what anybody says. That man is a musical genius.
Yeah.
And I will
think
say
so
that
as
till the
well.
day I die. People laugh at me when I say that, but he's a musical genius.
Probably the largest band of 83, arguably, is The Police. Of course,
Yeah.
Synchronicity came out, which
Yeah.
would end up being their final album. Madonna's self-titled debut album, how influential was she,
Man.
in the years to come? But even with her first album, just, a whole fashion trend and just, the movies and everything, she just knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, true story. And Rebel Yell from Billy Idol came out that year. Shout Out the Devil from Motley Crue came out that year.
Right.
Can't Slow Down from Lionel Richie.
That was big.
Some great soundtracks. Flashdance, Risky Business, they all came out in 83. So I mean, the list, and that's just a small list. I mean, there is a crap ton of other albums that
Oh yeah.
that came out this year that are just ridiculous.
Yeah, just across the board too. I mean,
Yeah.
metal and just straight up rock and roll.
Yeah.
We mentioned Stevie Ray Vaughan. We featured one song already in this list, so you got some blues in there. Just straight up pop albums from Madonna and David Bowie, and I think you're right. There's just such a variety packed in, but that sound, that what we think of when we think of 80s music, you're thinking of some of these songs from these albums.
Yeah. When I was doing the countdown several years ago, I made a playlist of the top songs of 82 and then a playlist of 83 songs. And you can literally hear the difference in what 82 sounds like and what 83 sounds like. And this, and that's why I've long thought 83 is when 80s music started. And it is the jumping off point for everybody that created music in the 80s.
Well, and the biggest album of 83, which actually came out in December of 82, which we're not including since we're just doing albums that were released in 83, was Thriller, of course.
Oh, yeah.
The biggest album of 83. So you got Michael
We didn't
Jackson.
even list that. I mean, that was the biggest album of all time.
All time, but technically, if you go over to Billboard's list, it was the #1 selling album of 83.
Yeah.
So we're not including that, but how big was Michael Jackson?
All of his big hits from that album came out in 83.
Right. And
so,
in 84 too.
Yeah.
I mean, that thing was around forever. Broke all kinds of records and everything.
Yep.
All right, well, we're going to count down our top 5 albums of 83, essentially our personal lists here, and they're all different. We made sure that was the case, so we're not repeating anything here.
Yeah, we didn't have to make sure. We literally both picked 5 different albums.
We did.
It's cool.
We did. I thought for sure we'd have at least one on here.
Yeah.
I did pass over one because I knew you were going to take it. There was some of that action going on, but I think it's
Did I pick
fun
it?
that we picked. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll be talking about it. I'll tell you which one it was.
All right. Cool. Yeah.
But anyway, do you want to go first?
No, you can go first. Go ahead.
All right, so I'm going to go first here. My number 5 album of 1983 is Reach the Beach by the Fixx, which was released May 1983. It was the second studio album by the Fixx, and it's been their most successful to date. It reached number 8 on the Billboard album chart, certified platinum here in the US and Canada, and it also contains their 2 most successful singles, One Thing Leads to Another, which everybody knows, and Saved by Zero.
That's a great song.
I've always loved Cy Kernan's voice. Very distinctive. I kind of liken it to Danny Elfman of Oingo Boingo. I mean, those 2 voices, I don't know. They have this almost nasally quality, but it fits right in with the, what I would call new wave music of the time. And the guitars are what's always stood out to me in the Fixx, including the rhythm and the lead and the bass guitar. I mean, just incredible guitar work. The bass drives a lot of songs if you really listen closely.
That's true.
But, it's been within the past maybe 5 years that I've really listened to this whole album. I was always fascinated with the cover, and a lot of these that I picked too, the covers are a part of the experience, as well. But that torso of the man in the water, pushing towards the bright colors on the beach. Yeah. I found it at a vinyl booth in a local antique mall and decided I was going to get it without hearing, it's an entirety.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I really enjoyed
strictly for the cover. That's amazing.
Yeah, no, but I really enjoyed the singles, and I had enjoyed them for years. But I was like, I'm going to give it a shot. And there was my collecting experience with vinyl, which it goes back maybe 10 or 15 years now, is I wanted to collect albums that I never had before. I don't want to just buy albums that I had and just have it in a different format,
Right.
I want to experience some new music in this way while I'm spinning the record. So this was one of them. Some of the album tracks I really like are The Sign of Fire, which was actually released as a single, and it did crack the top 40, but not a lot of people know that one. There's also a track called Opinions, which has a real slow vibe, and it ends the first side of the album. Love that one. The title track too, which leads off the B-side, is really great. But my favorite song, which we'll be playing here in a minute, is Saved by Zero. I think I like it better than even One Thing Leads to Another. And my boys do too, because maybe a decade ago, Toyota used the song in its TV ads, if you remember.
I remember that.
To the point where I was taking my boys to school one day and it came on the radio like the ad did, and my oldest requested it to put on their nighttime CD list that I was burning them at the time.
Nice.
So I was making CDs for them when they were younger to listen to at night. But I love all the synth effects that they use on it. There's that real driving riff that the rhythm guitar and bass match each other.
Yes.
Bump, 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 bump. It's just, I love it. And there's just so many interesting things to listen to when you listen to Saved by Zero. There's all these like weird effects going on in the background.
Yeah, in headphones. Yes.
It's so good. I was telling Eric off the air, a lot of their catalog has been removed from Spotify. I'm really mad about it, but the singles are still there. So that's why I picked essentially Saved by Zero, because I know it's out there and waiting for us to listen to.
Right.
For those of you who are listening on Spotify, but that's my number 5 pick.
Good pick. So my number 5 pick actually got put on the list yesterday. I swapped out a different album for this one.
What's your number 5?
It was a band. Well, it was Breaking the Chains by Dokken.
Oh, okay.
But as I thought about it, I didn't really start listening to that album until '84, even though it came out in '83, and so I didn't put it on the. I listened to this number 5 album way more in '83 than I did that album, so I swapped them out. I think I told you last week when we were talking about our list, I had 6 and I couldn't pare them down, and that was these were the 2 that I was trying to decide between.
Gotcha.
My number 5 pick is Keep It Up by Loverboy.
Okay.
This is the 3rd studio album from this Canadian band. It was released in June of '83. It achieved double platinum status and reached number 7 on the Billboard Hot 200 album chart. It had 3 singles: Strike Zone, Hot Girls in Love, which got to number 11, and Queen of the Broken Hearts, which got to number 34. It's got lots of keyboards, and it's got a very early 80s sound rock, but it's full of just, incredible songs, and some under-the-radar guitar work. And actually, this album was the first salvo that my music Nazi parents fired across the bow. You probably heard me, if you've listened to this show or you watched some of my videos this summer, you heard me talk about my parents and how they were trying desperately to keep me from listening to rock music. I borrowed this tape from a friend of mine named Jeff, and my parents found it in my room. And they read, they were reading this, you could look on the back of the cassette and see the names of the songs, and there was stuff on there like
Hot
Girls in Love, Passion Pit, One Night Love, One Night, I think it's called One Night Love Affair, I can't remember. And they were like immediately told me to get rid of the tape. I had to give it back to my friend Jeff. I was not to listen to that again. So I had to. Neither one at that point, neither he or I had a dual cassette deck yet, and so we literally had to put a boombox in front of another boombox and record it that way, so I could have a copy of it until I could find somebody that could do a true dubbing from cassette to cassette. And I still, even though it was a crappy recording, I listened to it all the time. This is the first album that I remember playing air guitar to hard. I mean, like playing air guitar like with a tennis racket. I loved this album. And in my opinion, there's really not a skippable song on the album. Even though there were 3 singles on the album, I don't even think those 3 were the best songs on the album. But however, for my money, the best song, my favorite song, the best song has to be "Strike Zone," which was one of their singles that didn't even crack the. I think it got up to number 48. I think. So
okay.
But that's my favorite song on the album, and I was listening to it last night just to refresh my memory of all the songs on there, and I still remember the parts of that song that I played air guitar to. I mean, it just all these memories came back of me sitting in my room with headphones on, because if my parents heard me listening to it, I was going to get in trouble again. So, but yeah, so my song pick off of this album is going to be "Strike Zone."
All right, on to my number 4 album of 1983, which is another one that just within the last maybe 5 years, I've really dove into, and now I can play it side 1, side 2, all the way through. Yeah, I'm flipping the record multiple times. It is Cargo by Men at Work.
Nice.
Cargo was the second studio album by Men at Work, released in April of '83, produced 4 singles, including the international hit Overkill. You remember that Scrubs episode with Colin Hay?
Yes.
You know, he appears throughout the episode and he's singing that Overkill song. That's the only episode I remember of that show. I remember we got into the show for a little bit, but I don't know. I was just enamored by that. And I knew that song, back in the day. But Cargo's release, I thought this was funny. Cargo's release was actually held back due to the success of Business as Usual, their debut album.
Yeah.
It lasted, I mean, it was on the charts. It came out in 81, and it was still charting late into 82. So they actually had this album ready, and they held it back until 83 to release it, because it just was nuts. They were winning Grammys and, all kinds of stuff. Yeah. That whole Australian push kind of at that time. But, like I said, I was a fan of their radio hits mainly over the years. But again, starting my vinyl collection, I told myself, I'm going to go back. I'm going to get albums that I've just never had before. And Men at Work was one of them. I actually bought both of their albums, the first one and this one. They're so good, man. They're so good. I love their song mix.
Yeah.
They have some, what I would call like silly or even novelty songs.
Dr. Heckle?
Yeah, well, this one is, on this album, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Jive, or Dr. Heckle and Mr. Jive.
Yeah.
And the one Settle Down, My Boy.
Yeah.
I love that one. But they have some real like yacht rock, almost reggae sounding songs.
Yes.
Blue for You on this one, really good song. And there's on both of these albums, I really haven't gone past these 2 yet, and I assume I will at some point, but I like it when other members of the band will take a song or 2 on the album. Greg Ham is one of them that takes the lead vocals on this song, and you hear Colin Hay doing the backing vocals, which I think are great.
Yeah. He's got a great voice.
That the Settle Down, My Boy, I don't know if that's Greg Ham or one of the other guys doing the lead on that one. And then the song I Like To, which is really funky, and it's a real up-tempo song. Yeah. Really like that one. But when they want to be serious, there are some really well-written and produced songs on both of these albums. My favorites, I'll say, of course, Overkill. It's probably my number 3, actually, on this album. It's really tough for me to pick a favorite to play here because, again, front to back, these albums are so great.
Oh yeah.
I like my number 2 would be "It's a Mistake." That song, I don't know. You may think I'm nuts, but I love it even over Overkill. And a lot of people, go back and they'll say Overkill is probably their best song. But I don't know. I like "It's a Mistake."
That's probably my favorite song on the album.
It's so good.
Yeah.
But my favorite on this album, I'll say, is a song called "No Sign of Yesterday."
Are you kidding?
Yeah, no, it's a real kind of...
It's so funny that you say that, because I listened to this album this summer on my 100 albums in 100 days. And that's the song I picked off of off the album to put on my playlist, is that song. That's a great song.
It's so good. It's more of a mellow song.
Yeah.
You get, Colin's vocals are so great. I mean, in every song, but especially with the harmonies and the chorus in this song, he sings lower too at the beginning, and then he goes and gets his high range at the end. But it's so great. It's the end of side A on the record. The rhythm guitar, and then there's these synth strings that come in to kind of fill in the gaps. It's so good. And there's an awesome guitar solo in this. Just almost out of nowhere, you get that guitar solo in the middle.
It's true, yeah.
Because you just don't get guitar solos really with Men at Work.
Right. It's a great song.
Colin does this. It's almost like what you've talked about before, like a vocal solo at the very end of the song. The guitar and the sax are playing in the background, and he just goes off and does these little real trilling like vocalizations. Oh my God. I can't say enough about this song.
Yeah.
There's another one on Business as Usual that I hope we get to at some point that I'd love to talk about. That's my favorite one on that one. That's an album track. But this song is so good, and I really want people to listen to this one. If you're on Spotify, check it out. If you've not listened to Men at Work, go listen to their first 2 albums, and I guarantee you won't be disappointed. Especially if you're like, oh gosh, I'm sick of hearing Down Under. I'm sick of hearing Who Can It Be Now? There's so much more on both of these albums. I just can't tell you
that
enough.
song was such a surprise when I heard it, when I was listening to the album. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I remember just putting it on loop, and I listened to it probably 5 or 6 times in a row because it's so good.
I do the same thing. I'll be listening to the album. I'll listen to that one a few times, and then I'll go to the second side, which I think starts with "It's a Mistake." But oh gosh, I just love this song. So let's have everybody here.
Yes, sit here and listen with us, will you?
Soak it all in.
So my number 4 album is "Seven and the Ragged Tiger" by Duran Duran.
I kept this one for you. Yep, I knew you were going to pick this one. I had no doubt.
I knew this is what it was when you said that. I knew this. This is the band's 3rd album. It's their first number 1 album in the UK, and it reached number 8 in the US. It's certified platinum in the UK, double platinum in the US, and triple platinum in Canada. They released 3 really big singles off of this album: "Union of the Snake," "New Moon on Monday," and "The Reflex," which was their first number 1 song. I was already a Duran Duran fan, not a huge fan, but I was already a fan of their stuff when I first saw the video for "Union of the Snake," which is their first single off the album. And I was, I'd already seen their videos from Rio, and is there something I should know? So I was already a fan when I saw "Union of the Snake," and that video is just over the top amazing. They really set the bar for the videos that they had coming down the line. Oh yeah. Even "New Moon on Monday," which is like a 17-minute movie, and, "Wild Boys," and
well, "The Reflex" is the one where
the Reflex,
they're like in concert, and that
wave comes out of the screen.
Yeah. I remember that.
They just had the best videos. So, I was already a fan just because I'd heard, MTV had just blown up, and they were playing "Hungry Like the Wolf" and Rio, all the time. Honestly, when I first heard the album version of "The Reflex," I thought it was meh. I wasn't really a fan of it. It wasn't until a year later when they released the remix version of that single and the video that I was blown away and became a full-fledged Duran fan. That video and that song are what made me just a solidified Duran Duran fan, which is so counter to what I was listening to at the time. This is what me being a fan of them has always shocked me and other people. I remember in high school, I was dating a girl and we were riding around in my car one day, and she was looking through all of the tapes in my tape case in my car, and there were like all these, you know, metal bands and hair metal, and right in the middle is a Duran Duran tape. And she was like, "You're so weird." And I remember her saying that, "You're so weird." I'm like, "Why?" She's like, you have all this heavy metal, and then you have one Duran Duran tape. I'm like, "Hey, don't hate on Duran Duran."
Yeah.
I don't know what about them it has always just been, I don't know. I've just always been a huge fan of theirs, no matter what I was listening to. For me, there's not a skippable song on this album. If you were to skip one, it would be a song called Tiger Tiger. It's on the second side of the album. It's an instrumental. It's the next to the last song. Mm-hmm. Personally, I love it. It's weird, and it's very Nick Rhodes, the keyboard player. He's really up in his element there. I love it, but if you had to skip a song, it would be that one. But there's so many great hooks in these songs. Just you know, like chorus hooks or hooks from, you know, on the bridge. You know, Simon Le Bon knows how to write a great chorus vocal hook for these songs, which I think is what attracts me to a lot of their music, because he just knows how to write a great vocal hook. But for my money, the best song on the album is Union of the Snake. Now, if the single version of the Reflex, the one that you hear on the video, if that had been on the original album, then that would have been my favorite song on the album. And if you get the reissued versions of the album, it's on there. It's on there as an added song. But on the original album,
I'm with you on that. Yeah.
On the original album, I don't count the Reflex as my favorite, because it's just it's incredibly different, and it's not as hooky as the remix version, and so
it's so weird that a radio edit actually, or I guess you call it remix, but it's so weird that that's better than what the album version is, because I'm all the time telling people go listen to the album version, because you know the radio mix cuts out so much. But I'm in agreement with you. I found they did, I think, 2 or 3 remix box sets, CD box sets, that is just a bunch of singles that are remixes. I found one real cheap at a thrift store and bought it immediately because it shows, like, it has the 45 sleeves that they were is the CD sleeve too inside the box set, and there's maybe 10 or 12 in there, but I can't remember the name of the release that it's called, but it went from different years. So it went from, like, you know, the late 70s to early 80s, and then there's another 80s period in there, and then up through I think the early 90s with the Wedding album. Oh yeah. They had all these little different box sets with just remixes of mainly of the singles. So nice. Yeah, I'm there with you, man. It's the music. You know, when people call them a boy band, I kind of turn my head at that. Yeah. Because, you know, they were long before that, quote unquote, was a thing. But their music is just so beyond what you would think 5 just random singers are up there singing, you know, like in a boy band.
No, yeah. I
mean, you've got to love the music is what really it draws in male fans.
Right at the beginning of the pandemic, when we were on lockdown, John Taylor, the bass player, on his Instagram account, he would post, like, once a week, he would post videos of how he, you know, what he was playing on certain songs, and he would play the bass lines for these songs. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that, I mean, I've heard him before when I hear the songs, but to watch him play, I'm like, why did nobody take you seriously when
right.
Yeah. So, but I read an article about a year and a half ago, right before they hit the road again last year, the band was talking about just going over their anthology and all their singles and everything, and everybody in the band has said if Nile Rodgers had not remixed the Reflex, that would never have been a single or a number one song. So that's how different and how much better that remix is than the album. Yeah. So for this album, we're gonna play Union of the Snake.
All right, my number 3 pick on our top 5 of 1983 is Frontiers by Journey. It was their 8th studio album.
Man, that's a lot.
Yeah, I did not realize there was that many before this.
No kidding.
Released in February of '83, reached number 2 on the album chart, charted 4 singles in the top 40, the biggest being Separate Ways, Worlds Apart, at number 8. Certified 6 times platinum in the U.S. For me, Journey was a radio band in my early years. I bought their greatest hits in early 90s during the Columbia House BMG era, which I think my son has that exact CD in his car now.
That's awesome.
And I've not really explored their full catalog, to be honest. Escape and Frontiers are mainly what I've listened to the most.
Yeah.
And I'll go back and listen to when and I'll throw in there Steve Perry's Street Talk, which I have on vinyl. I love that album as well. But my roommate in college, he also had Trial by Fire, thanks to the When You Love a Woman, when that came out, when they had their little reunion phase there in I think 96. So I've heard that one as well, but I've not really gone back to listen to the earlier Journey albums. But I actually think I have the CD single for When You Love a Woman. We were over the moon for that song. But I think their hits were just are so just overpowering to me that, and they've got a ton of them, of course, that I keep going back to the hits mainly and not exploring kind of their early stuff in full albums, which I probably should change at some point. But as far as Frontiers, I love Frontiers. Some of the album tracks I like on there, Chain Reaction. Neil Schon has a great end solo on that one that I really enjoy. I like the last 2 tracks on the album, which is the title track and then Rubicon. They get me really engaged at that point. Like, when you're putting an album together, I imagine back in the day, you're thinking of songs to get you to flip the record. And both of those, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna flip it and get back going on this album. But they get me really engaged, and not just to keep listening to the album. And the singles are just so iconic, though. Separate Ways. I remember being at a friend's house, and I can't remember what in the world we were doing, but he's like, let's put on some music. And he just cranked that, to as much as those speakers would go on his stereo. And we just kind of soaked it in. I'll never forget that. It's such a great song. And Faithfully, both of those might be my number 1 and my number 2 overall songs for Journey. I love both of those songs, both of them on this album, of course. But I'll play one that I feel like doesn't get enough airplay today. I mean, you'll hear Faithfully, Separate Ways all the dang time on whatever station you're listening to. From 80s on 8 to the dentist office, you're going to hear both of those songs. One that I don't think gets enough airplay is Send Her My Love.
Oh, that's a great song.
I love the drum kind of intro that it has, and that riff, that main riff just hits you. And you get, of course, Steve's smooth voice. Neil has a great solo in Send Her My Love as well. And then my favorite part is when Steve comes back in at the end. Send her my love.
Yes.
He's just kind of riffing. Roses never fade. I'm sorry, folks, but I've sung this song windshield karaoke so many times. It's not even funny.
That's awesome.
But it's just such a smooth song. It's one that Journey has this. They can rock out. Of course, they can be your couple skate, but they have this kind of middle ground too. I mean, no matter what tempo they go at, and especially with Steve, of course, they're just so smooth, and I love Send Her My Love. So that's the one I want to play for this album. Did you listen to Journey, or what's your experience been with Journey?
Oh, I mean, I'm the same as you. Those two albums are the same ones I've listened to a lot too. I've heard, bits and pieces of their other stuff, but these two, especially this album, is one I listen to the most. Mm-hmm. But I agree that "Send Her My Love" is just a fantastic song. That I don't think it gets near as much play as the rest of it does. But yeah, it's a great song. Okay, my number 3 pick is Pyromania from Def Leppard. This is the 3rd studio album from the band. It was released in January of '83, and it was their first album to feature guitarist Phil Collen. It's certified diamond in the U.S. with 10 million in album sales. 7 times platinum in Canada, and a mere silver in their home country in the UK.
What? They don't know what they're doing over there,
right?
Across the pond.
They had 3 huge top 40 singles and videos from this album. They had Photograph, which got to number 13. Rock of Ages got to number 16. And Foolin' got to...
or whatever he says.
Got to number 28.
Foolin' is great too, yeah.
Yeah. One crazy fact about this album is that they hit the studio with Mutt Lange with just a bunch of riffs and no complete songs.
Oh wow!
The plan was to put the songs together in the studio with Lange. So much so that he ended up getting a songwriting credit for every song on the album.
Oh, really? I didn't realize that.
There are also no real drums on this album. Aside from the cymbals, all the drums were programmed on a Fairlight sampler.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So
you've always had that electronic drum sound, I think. Yeah. Or at least with this one, and of course Hysteria too. But...
Well, if you listen to this album close enough, you can hear that the drums are just a little too perfect. They're just a little too mechanical. So, but yeah, there's no real except for the cymbals. There's no real drums on this album. I remember seeing the video for Photograph a lot when it first came out. That was the first single from the album. I remember seeing that video quite a bit, either on MTV or some of the local video shows. But my first vivid memory of Def Leppard was my cousins played me Rock of Ages for the first time. And these are the same if you've heard our episode for Back in Black, these are the same cousins I was with the first time I heard AC/DC. So whenever we would go see my grandparents in Eastern Oklahoma, usually I would spend at least one night with my cousins. And my grandparents lived, out in the country on one side of town, and my cousins lived out in the country on the other side of town. So we would meet in the middle, and make my parents and their mom would make the handoff, and I would go home with them. And I remember us meeting, and they didn't even say hi to me. They didn't say anything. They literally were like, "You've got to hear this." And they had a boom box in the back seat, and so I was in the car with them.
Nice.
And the first thing they play me is Rock of Ages, and that intro.
Yeah.
And we were literally just, and the reason they did it was because they had just bought the tape at Walmart, and they were playing it. And so literally, there was no hello, no what's going on. You've got to hear this.
Listen to this, Eric.
Yes. And so we played it all the way back to their
awesome
house. And listened to that album I spent 2 nights with them. We listened to that album the whole weekend. So that's my first vivid memory of this album and Def Leppard in particular. And much like I said on the last album, there's not a skippable song on this album, period. Every song on here is just fantastic. Peak Joe Elliott vocals. He sounds so good on this album. I saw an interview with him a couple of years ago, and he was talking about just how long they've been a band and all their albums and tours. And somebody brought up, does he ever go back and listen to their first couple of albums and think that was me or whatever. And he was like, "Oh my God, I go back and listen to Pyromania." And I'm like, "How did I ever sing that way?" He was, he was like, "There's no way I could ever sing that way again." He goes, "That's freaking amazing." Peak Joe Elliott vocals. He's got such a great rock voice, and this is peak for him. It's really hard for me to pick a favorite song off of this album. I love all the singles. Like I said, Rock of Ages is really is special to me because I remember my cousins pointing that out. Foolin's a great song. I like Die Hard the Hunter, Stage Fright. It's really hard to pick a favorite for me, but I ended up settling on a song called Too Late for Love.
Oh yeah,
it's a great song, right?
Too late.
Yeah.
That opening riff too is awesome.
Oh yeah.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. So
I can hear it in my head. Yeah.
When was the first time you heard Def Leppard?
Hysteria.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I probably heard some of the singles off of this and maybe even on MTV, but the first time I really sat down and listened to Def Leppard was me and my neighborhood friend Tim, him playing me Hysteria. So
yeah.
I've gone back since then, and this is just a fantastic album. Probably to Hysteria, since that's where I came in. That it's right behind it for me. But
right.
You're right. It's front to back, just awesome.
Yeah, it's just this and the next album that I'm going to talk about were really my gateway drugs into hard rock and heavy metal. So anyway, we're going to listen to Too Late for Love.
All right, my number 2 in our countdown, we have talked about or mentioned before. It is Eliminator by ZZ Top. The 8th studio album by ZZ Top was released in March 1983. And it's their most successful album by far, as we told you earlier in the season.
Yeah.
11 times platinum in the U.S. alone. That's diamond status.
That's crazy.
Give Me All Your Lovin', Sharp Dressed Man, Legs, Got Me Under Pressure, and TV Dinners, all released as singles.
TV Dinners.
Yeah. Some making
video.
the right. Some are made the pop charts. All of them made the rock charts. Of course, the cover, the iconic car on the album cover, and then the music videos as well. So influential, and 11 million people can't be wrong with this album. I mean, it's so good. You can hear a little bit more about our personal history with the band and the album in that Sharp Dressed Man episode that we did earlier this season. But as far as the album goes, like you said for Pyromania, I don't think there's a bad song on it.
Yeah.
You get all the great singles, and then outside of the big 3, what I would call, I'm a big fan of that gratuitously long drum fill and Got Me Under Pressure. Crash. And
I completely forgot about that.
Right in the middle of that song. It is so good. It is the longest drum fill I think ever. But I love that song so much.
Yeah.
TV Dinners, like I was joking back with you today, since Eric is a bachelor at the house right now. I said, so you're cooking some TV dinners. I should choose that song tonight. No, he's a good cook. Anyway, it's a really, really fun song. That music video is fun too.
Yeah, that video is crazy.
And some other album tracks on there that are real fun. A song called Thug. It's really funky. Lots of slap bass. Like, I don't hear slap bass with ZZ Top.
No.
But that song is full of it, and it's so great. And I'm actually going to choose an album track to play because I know everybody is probably sick of hearing Give Me All Your Love and Sharp Dressed Man and Legs, because they just wear those songs out now, anywhere. But there's an album track called I Need You Tonight. It has just this awesome groove. And the solo, of course, you're going to get the gratuitously long solos in this one that you'd expect from Billy Gibbons. But I love his vocals on this one too. I mean, this is the song, I Need You Tonight. This is the song I want to be playing if I ever get a ride in the ZZ Top mobile.
That's
just
amazing.
really just a driving song. I can picture myself in that thing with the windows down. It's nighttime. You're going through the city, whatever, and you just got to crank to the max. oh man, I love this song so much,
Yes.
and I don't think of course, 11 million people or 11 million albums sold. You might have heard it before, but it doesn't get any real airplay unless you listen to the album. So I want to
True.
play that for everybody. But yeah, Eliminator. I came in with the next one, which now it's gonna. I put myself on the spot. It's gonna kill me what the next album was. With Sleeping
Afterburner?
Bag, Afterburner.
Yeah.
I came in with Afterburner, like I mentioned on the show, but oh man, if I'm gonna listen to full albums by ZZ Top, it's those two.
Okay, my number 2 pick is Metal Health by Quiet Riot. This is the band's 3rd album, but it's the first to receive worldwide release because the first 2 were only released in Japan.
In Japan, yeah,
Yes.
that's insane.
Very, very big in Japan. Metal Health was the first heavy metal album to reach number 1 on the Billboard 200 chart. It actually replaced the Police in the number 1 spot in November of '83. Their song "Come On Feel the Noise" reached number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100. And due to its commercial success, Metal Health is regarded by some as the catalyst that opened the door for hair metal's immense popularity throughout the next several years.
Mm-hmm.
It went on to sell more than 10 million copies worldwide and over 6 million in the U.S. alone, being certified 6 times platinum by the RIAA. I heard this album for the first time on the same weekend with my cousins as when I heard Def Leppard. It was just a life-changing weekend for me, apparently. They had actually bought these 2 tapes at Walmart before we met up. And so that's all we listened to all weekend. And from the opening, so the first song on side A is Metal Health. And from the opening drum riff and Kevin Dubro's scream, I was hooked. I could not get enough of this album. I loved both of them, these 2 albums, this one and Pyromania, but this one especially was my gateway drug to heavy metal. It's really what got me hooked on heavy metal. About 7 years ago, roughly 7 years ago, there was and I've talked about this before, there was a hair metal festival here in town, music festival.
Mm-hmm.
And Friday night, Quiet Riot played, which really at that point, the only remaining original member was Frankie Banali, the drummer. But a friend of mine who works for a paper in our hometown, which is like an hour north of here at the time, he worked for the paper at the time. He got me credentials, like press VIP credentials to go basically backstage during the shows. And so Friday night, between acts, I was walking around backstage and I had to go to the restroom. So I was in line for the restroom and the guy in front of me turns around and it's Frankie Banali. And I literally said out loud, "Oh my God, you're Frankie Banali." And he kind of chuckled. He said, "Yeah." And he shook my hand. And I told him, I was like, I said, "You have no idea how pivotal Metal Health was in my life. It was the gateway drug for me to get into heavy metal. Man, that I wore that album out. It meant so much to me." And he literally almost started crying, and said,
wow.
He said that that's a great story. I love hearing that stuff. That's so great that you told me that. And we stood there and talked for like 15 minutes, just shooting the crap about other bands that were playing that weekend, and just some other Quiet Riot stuff. He's the coolest awesome guy in the world. So if you're not a metal fan, there's going to be several skippable songs on this album. I'll just tell you right now, okay? If you're not a hair band or a heavy metal fan, there's several songs on this album you're not going to like. But for me, there's really only one skippable song on here, and that's "Don't Want to Let You Go." It's kind of it doesn't fit on the album. It seems kind of it's less quote unquote metal, and it just doesn't fit on the album. I don't know where it came from, but that's the one I skip usually. otherwise, this is a solid metal album. Kevin DuBrow is one of the best voices in 80s metal. His scream is there's several songs on here where he just screams, and it is the best sounding thing in 80s metal. Carlos Cavazo, the guitar player, he's got a song on here called Battle Axe. It's a solo, but it's really what it is, like a minute and a half. It's called Battle Axe. While he's no Eddie Van Halen, it's still a great song. It's still we used to joke when I was in high school that, hey, at least he's got a solo on an album. I don't have that, so I mean,
right? Yeah.
I mean, I can trash him all he wants. He's still got a solo on an album. I don't. So yeah. While this is one of my favorite metal albums from the early '80s, it really was. It was the album that really just pushed me over the edge for
Before you make your pick, I do want to interject one thing.
Yeah.
Every time I think of this album, and in particular the title track, Mental Health, Bang Your Head, I when I was a youngster in, say, like, I don't know, 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade, I rode the bus. I went to a private school, which was about 9 miles away. So I caught a bus into the local high school, and then I caught another bus with the high schoolers down to the Votech school. So that 9-mile journey back and forth each day with the high schoolers was a real education. What they did, they would of course sit in the back.
Yeah.
And somebody always had a boombox with them. Like, the bus driver didn't care. He was the coolest bus driver in the world. I got stories about him. But he allowed them to have boomboxes on there. And I swear to God, I listened to this album for an entire year back and forth. Going to school as whatever age I was at the time, 7, 8 years old, whatever. So yeah, I go back to that. And every time I hear Bang Your Head, Mental Health, of course, especially, I just think of that bus ride, them turning their class rings upside down and hitting me on the top of the head. Bang your head, they would do.
God.
Oh God, it hurt, man. It hurt
Lord.
like a mother. But it takes me right back there, man.
That's so funny. There was when I was in 8th grade, this album was out, and when I was in 8th grade, and there was at the end of the year they had a talent show, and there was a group of guys that did a lip sync to Mental Health, and they had borrowed instruments from somebody, but they didn't know how to play them. They were just it was just
yeah
just lip syncing and faking it or whatever. But the guy that was supposed to be the lead singer, he got up on stage with one of those masks on that they, like off the album cover.
Yeah, right.
And if you've seen the video, which is one of my favorite videos, by the way, because it looks so dark and creepy. But Kevin DuBrow pulls that mask off and throws it into the audience while he's singing. And this kid did that during the song, and that crowd, that 7th and 8th grade crowd, lost their damn minds when he did that. And I don't think he ever got the mask back.
yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, but this is really one of my favorite metal albums. So my favorite song on here is "Slick Black Cadillac."
All right, we're at number 1 now. For me, it was a tough call, but I'm gonna put "Synchronicity" by The Police at number 1.
Great album.
It was their 5th and final album, released in June of '83, reached number 1 on the US and UK charts, 8 times platinum here in the US, and it features the monster hits "Every Breath You Take," "King of Pain," "Wrapped Around Your Finger," all top 10 hits.
Yeah.
"Every Breath You Take" was number 1 for 8 weeks, won 3 Grammys also thanks to this album. For the longest time, they were definitely a top 40 band for me. I bought their hits in that same era that I bought Journey's hits. The same with Sting. Sting, I was mainly knew his singles as a solo artist. And then, like I said before, when I was burning CDs for my boys, and I was actually giving them some of my CDs, they knew them as the Yellow Guys, because their greatest hits has these little yellow men on there.
Yep.
So Dad, put on the Yellow Guys tonight. So they loved the Police.
Nice.
But I first gravitated towards Sting's solo albums as far as full albums go. 10 Summoner's Tales. I drifted back a bit, like Dream of Blue Turtles. And then even went a little bit forward. Mercury Rising, Brand New Day. I remember getting those albums when they came out. But when I went into my, what I would call classic rock phase in the early 2000s and went back to the basically 60s, 70s, early 80s to listen to rock, what was popular in rock at the time, I felt like I needed to listen to the Police's records and their full albums. So Zenyatta Madada, which was, I think, right before this one or maybe two before this one. I really like that one. Yeah. And then, of course, this album, I've got them both on vinyl now. So as far as Synchronicity goes, there's really only one skippable track on the album to me. That's the song, if you want to call it a song, Mother, which is, I just never quite understood this one. It's like, almost has an Indian music feel, and then there's this dude just bitching about everything, including his mother. I don't know if it's Sting or who is doing the vocals, but it's just the weirdest dang song. Outside of that, I mean, you've got the iconic singles we talked about. They speak for themselves. Lots of airplay still today,
Oh, yeah.
The dentist's office and everywhere else, you'll hear all those singles. I like, there's Synchronicity 1 and 2. 1 is really great. It leads off the album. Just a real driving track. There's, it's all their musical abilities at their peak. And with, three guys, Sting on bass and Andy and Stewart on drums, Andy on guitar, there's so much going on there. And, trios, I love trios. They have their own kind of distinct sound, and I'd put them up there with like Rush as well.
Oh yeah.
You get some other elements, of course, on the studio albums, but there's just something to be said about a good trio. And these guys are all at their peak. It's a shame that they went out like they did on their peak, but
right.
It's so good. Walking in your footsteps, I should say. Tea in the Sahara. They feel like more of something off one of Sting's solo albums.
Right.
Now to me, I mean, you can hear, when you get to like Dream of the Blue Turtles, it would fit in perfectly with like that album.
Sure.
So it was a little bit, they had some other interesting stuff before this album, but one of my favorite album tracks didn't even make the LP. It only made it to the cassette and the CD because of space.
Oh, really?
Murder by Numbers.
Oh, yeah, that's a great song. Yeah.
It's not on the vinyl. Can't find it on the LP.
Because it wouldn't fit.
It wouldn't fit, so it's only on the cassette and CD. But that's a really great song.
Nice.
The chord progression on that one is just so interesting for me.
Yeah.
But my favorite by far on the track is Synchronicity II.
Yes.
It's the end of the first side, I believe.
God, that's such a good song.
Another really driving and powerful song for a trio. I mean, it's just amazing. I love Sting's vocalizations at the beginning.
Yeah.
He's just way up in his high range. The main riff in the verses is really good, but the break that's about halfway through the song where you get Andy's guitar work, really fun. He's kind of like dragging the pick over the strings.
Yeah.
And there's that real long, it's almost like menacing, or,
it's a creepy song.
They talk about a Scottish loch, so it's almost like the Loch Ness monster there coming to life.
It is a really creepy song, but yeah. It's
one of my favorite Police songs for sure. So I've got to play that for y'all as my number one pick. But did you listen to this back in the day? Did you get into the Police at all with your heavy metal self?
This is this is probably. I mean, I listened to these songs more as singles than I did the whole album. I didn't listen to the whole album till later on.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Synchronicity 2 is by far and away my favorite song off of this album. I listen to that song all the time, even just by itself. I just play the song over and over again. And the one funny story about that song is when they were filming the video, the big stack of basically junk that Andy's drum set's sitting on caught on fire.
Stuart, you mean?
Stuart, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Stuart's drum set sitting on caught on fire, and they cleared out the studio, but they couldn't get Stuart down off of the stack because he wouldn't come down. he just wanted to keep filming. So there's parts of the video where you see smoke, and that's because what he's sitting on is on fire, and he wouldn't get off the drums. But yeah, this is by far my favorite song. All right, my number one pick for album in 1983 is Midnight Madness by Night Ranger.
Of course.
This is the band's second studio album, released in October of 8th. The album produced 3 charting singles and contains the band's best-known hit, Sister Christian, which everybody in the free world has heard. Mm-hmm. It remains their highest-selling album at it's sold over 1 million copies in the U.S. My first exposure to Night Ranger was the video for "Don't Tell Me You Love Me." I got a little bit of play on MTV, but that was it. That's all I'd heard from them was "Don't Tell Me You Love Me." The first time I heard the song "Rockin' America" was when I saw the video, and when I tell you my life fundamentally changed when I saw it, I am not exaggerating. Of all the other songs that I ever played air guitar to, this is the one song that made me want to play guitar for real. I don't know why. I don't know what it was about it, but when I saw that video and heard the song, I literally came out of my chair in my room, and
that's awesome.
It just made me want to play it. I remember telling my parents the next day, I want to play guitar. And it was because of this song right here. I've seen them 7 or 8 times live. Mm-hmm. And every time I hear them play that song, I still get goosebumps. I still think about sitting in my room and hearing that song and playing air guitar to it when I was 13 or 14 years old. That's what that song and this
that's
album,
nostalgia, people.
That's right.
Yep. That's why we do what we do.
Yeah, and this album was part of that. Was part of the second salvo of my music Nazi parents fired over the bow. I think I told this story last season, maybe.
No, it was this season during
this season. Okay.
Yeah, during the Rockin' America episode. Yeah,
I told it on my videos this summer too. But I tried to buy this, and Seven of the Ragged Tiger, and my dad walked me back into the music store and made me return it. But I was not deterred, and I found a way to.
You did.
To copy.
I'm gonna play it myself, sucker.
So yeah, this album, that song, but this whole album was a very seminal point for me as far as wanting to be a musician. So there's every song on here is listenable. There's nothing skippable about this album. There's tons of great riffs that I spent hours trying to learn and play. And so they have 2 lead vocalists. They have Jack Blade, who's the bass player, and then Kelly Keagy, the drummer. They both share lead vocal duties, and they both have just incredible voices. And they do an incredible job doing backup vocals too on all their songs. I think my favorite song on this album, and this was another album I had a hard time picking out one song to play. You would think it would be Rockin' America, but it's not. It's a song called Touch of Madness.
Okay.
And if you listen to the intro of the song, it's this like little Jack in the Box tinkering sound. But if you listen closely in the background, there's a sound bite from the movie Poltergeist, where Carol Ann is like yelling "mommy" when she's in the TV, and it's kind of
oh wow,
yeah. If you listen closely, you hear that in the background, and the riff on this song, part of the riff on this song is incredibly, it just sounds so bad. I mean, bad in a good way. So this has always been probably my favorite track on the album. Do you have any kind of history with Night Ranger? I think we talked about this, but I don't remember.
Yeah, not
at all.
I haven't really listened to any of their albums outside of what singles they released. I know the singles from this album. I've just never really dove in past the bonus songs that you did put on. The episode as well, which I think Touch of Madness was one.
I believe
you got it on there.
If it wasn't, it should have been. But
we'll let everybody hear that one again. That was great.
Yeah. So this is my number one album. It's just a cornerstone album in my musical education and musical life, and wanting to be a guitar player, and so I'm going to play Touch of Madness.
All right. Well, that's our top 5 albums of 1983, I should say. Glad you guys came along. Would love to get your feedback, on the albums that we picked, obviously. But if there's one that was more important to you that didn't make our 2 lists, would love to hear about it. Of course, at Greatest Lists out there on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call that.
Twix.
If you're in Spotify, you can leave a comment right there. Or you can leave a comment over there on the retronetwork.com where we're posting episodes, or even on YouTube where we're posting episodes. Leave a comment there, wherever you're listening, and you'll of course be able to find us. But we will continue the countdown, though. We've got some tracks left to do here in the 80s to finish out season 2. We look forward to finishing that up. But these bonus episodes are really fun, man. I'm glad you picked this one.
Yeah, after I looked at that list of albums, I was like, oh, we've got to do something other than just the one we did for sports, because there was so many albums that came out this year. So
in '84, I don't know, there might be we might have to do another one of these next year, outside of maybe picking a couple albums to go track by track. But
sure,
I was looking through the '84 list too. I'm like, yeah, okay, shouldn't be too hard to put 5 together. So.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.
You've been listening to The Greatest Lists.